Love was never meant to be a choice. Not for people like her. Raised in the shadow of power, where emotions were treated like weakness, and trust was a currency too expensive to spend. She was 21 the night it all began. The night she walked into the wrong house and met the man every enemy feared, and every rule forbade her to touch. His name was Alexandro Volkov, the Russian Dawn. A man who ruled Chicago's underworld with an iron calm that made even silence feel dangerous. To the world, he was untouchable. To her, he was a living contradiction. Ruthless yet gentle, distant yet devastatingly human. And she was just Gina Moretti, her best friend's daughter in every way that mattered, but the one woman he should never have looked at the way he did. One rain-soaked night shattered everything. The fragile line between loyalty and desire vanished, and from that moment on their lives were bound, not by love, but by sin. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a confession whispered between thunder and heartbeat. A story of forbidden devotion, of guilt and redemption, and of a man who found his ruin in the only woman who ever saw his soul. So dim the lights. Take a deep breath, and step into a world where every glance is a risk, every silence is a confession, and every choice is betrayal. Comment below if you believe even the most forbidden love deserves a second chance. Subscribe for more stories of passion, power, and redemption. Because sometimes the greatest danger isn't the enemy waiting outside. It's the one your heart refuses to forget. The Chicago rain never fell softly that night. It struck the taxi roof in furious rhythm, as if the sky itself wanted to wash away everything she'd done. Gina pressed her forehead against the cold glass, watching the city lights blur into streaks of gold and red. Each flash reminded her how far she'd run, from her apartment, from her friends, from the truth she didn't want to name. When the car stopped in front of the Volkov mansion, her pulse faltered. The iron gates loomed like sentinels of another world. Her best friend's home, yes, but also the fortress of a man whose presence could silence a room. She paid the driver with trembling hands. Coins slipped from her fingers and clinked against the seat. That sound, small and helpless, echoed everything she felt inside. The front door opened before she even reached the steps. One of Alexandro's men stood there, tall, wordless, his black suit blending into the shadows. "Miss Moretti," he said simply, recognizing her. "You can wait inside." Inside, the house smelled of cedar and rain. Every surface gleamed. Every light was dim to warmth, but none of it comforted her. "Katerina?" she asked softly, her voice nearly swallowed by the marble hall. The guard shook his head. Miss Volkov went out. She won't be back tonight, of course. It was Friday. Katerina was probably laughing somewhere under strobe lights, while Gina stood here, soaked and alone. She turned to leave, ready to face the storm again, until she saw it. A thin line of golden light slipping from beneath a door at the end of the corridor. Alexandro's office. No one ever went in there, not even Katerina. But tonight, fear wasn't enough to stop her. Her shoes clicked softly as she approached. She hesitated only once before knocking. A deep voice answered from inside, smooth, quiet, controlled. "Come in." The door swung open. He was behind the desk, jacket off, shirt undone at the collar, sleeves rolled. Papers and a glass of scotch sat before him. His presence filled the room like smoke, calm but suffocating. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then he rose. "You shouldn't be here, Gina." His tone wasn't anger. It was warning. "I know." Her voice barely carried. I had nowhere else to go." He studied her. The rain in her hair, the smudged mascara, the way her arms crossed to hold herself together. Something flickered in his eyes then. Not pity. Something older, deeper, dangerous. "Sit down," he said quietly. "You're freezing," she obeyed. The chair felt too soft, the silence too heavy. Alexandro poured another glass, not for himself. For her. He didn't touch her. Didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to make her heartbeat forget its rhythm. And when their eyes finally met, the storm outside didn't seem half as dangerous as the one she'd just walked into. The glass trembled in her hands before she even took a sip. The scotch burned her throat, but it was easier than facing his eyes. Alexandro Volkov, her best friend's father, her father's ally, a man who could end wars with a phone call, and here she sat in his office like a lost child begging for warmth. He hadn't asked why she'd come. He didn't have to. His silence was enough to make her talk. "I thought I could handle it," she said finally, voice breaking. "The arguments, the noise, the way my father treats me like I'm still 12. She stopped herself, aware of who she was speaking to. He was not her friend. He was power wrapped in restraint. Alexandro's gaze didn't waver. "And you thought coming here would fix that?" "No," she whispered. "I just needed somewhere that didn't feel empty." The rain outside hit harder. Each drop sounded like a judgment. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he walked to the window, the dim light catching the faint scars on his knuckles. "You shouldn't come here when you feel lost, Gina. This house doesn't heal people. It uses them." She should have left right then, but something about the way he said it, quiet, almost sorrowful, made her heart tighten. "You sound like you know that from experience," she murmured. He turned his head slightly, the ghost of a smirk crossing his face. "Maybe I do." He shouldn't have let her in. The moment he saw her standing there, drenched, trembling, eyes red from holding back tears, he'd known it was a mistake. Gina Moretti was a line he could never cross. The daughter of an old ally, the best friend of his only child. But even monsters had weaknesses. Hers was innocence. His was temptation. He studied her now, the way her fingers traced the rim of the glass to avoid looking at him. There was fear in her posture, yes, but also trust. Too much of it. He forced his tone back to neutral. "Does Katerina know you're here?" Gina shook her head. "She doesn't even know I left." That stung more than it should have. He had built empires on loyalty, and here sat the one person who didn't owe him any, offering it freely. "You're a good friend to my daughter," he said finally. Gina smiled faintly, looking down. "I try to be." He wanted to end it there. Tell her to go home, to call a cab, but then she looked up, really looked, and he forgot how to breathe for a moment. There was no calculation in her eyes, no agenda, just exhaustion, and the quiet ache of someone who'd never truly been seen. Something inside him shifted. He stepped closer, and every nerve in her body tensed. "Do you always look at people like that?" she asked, trying to sound braver than she felt. "Like what?" "Like you already know what they're thinking." He held her gaze. "Maybe I do." She should have laughed. She should have left. But instead, she found herself whispering, "Then what am I thinking right now?" He didn't answer. He only reached forward and brushed a strand of wet hair from her cheek. And in that fleeting touch, brief, forbidden, electric, she realized why people called him dangerous. Because sometimes danger didn't have to threaten you. It could simply see you. She left before dawn. The sky over Chicago was pale gray, the kind that made the streets look washed out and tired. She hadn't slept. Every blink replayed the moment his fingers brushed her cheek. The warmth, the quiet, the way the world had stilled for a heartbeat that didn't belong to either of them. Her mind tried to call it nothing. A mistake, a moment born of exhaustion, but her body refused to believe it. By the time she reached her apartment, her dress clung cold against her skin. She went straight to the sink and splashed water on her face, as if she could scrub the night away. Her reflection didn't cooperate. Her eyes looked different. Brighter, guilty, alive. She pressed her palms to the counter, whispering to herself. It was just kindness, that's all. But she knew better. There was nothing kind about the way he'd looked at her. It had been hunger, restrained by discipline, and it terrified her how much she wanted him to lose control. Her phone buzzed. "Katerina." Gina hesitated before answering. "Where were you last night? I called you like 5 times. I stayed with a friend." Katerina laughed on the other end. "I was worried my boring best friend finally ran off with some guy." Gina forced a laugh too. Not likely. The lie left a bitter taste, because for the first time, she wished it wasn't a lie at all. He stood in the doorway long after she'd gone, her scent still faint in the air. Rain and fear and something painfully young. He told himself it meant nothing. She'd come for shelter. He'd offered it. But as the sun crept through the blinds, slicing gold across his desk, he realized he hadn't felt that kind of stillness in years. He poured another drink, though it was barely 6 a.m. The burn grounded him. The guilt didn't. He had always believed control was his greatest strength. Control had built his empire, raised his daughter, kept him alive. But last night, when Gina looked at him like he was something more than the monster people whispered about, control felt like a cage. His phone buzzed. A message from Katerina. "Morning, Papa. Going to brunch later." Normal. Ordinary. A reminder of what lines could never be crossed. He deleted the text before replying. He didn't trust his own words right now. From his office window, he watched the rain taper off into mist. The city moved on, unaware that somewhere in its gray sprawl, he'd already lost a piece of himself. He told himself it was over. She would not come back. But deep down, a quieter truth whispered otherwise. He was waiting. 3 weeks passed, and she almost convinced herself it had meant nothing. Almost. But every time she passed a certain street, or heard the low hum of an expensive car, her pulse betrayed her. She didn't dare set foot near the Volkov mansion again, until Katerina's 22nd birthday arrived, and the invitation left her no excuse. She stood before her mirror that night, staring at the reflection of a girl trying too hard to look fine. The pale silk dress shimmered under her room's warm light, delicate, too revealing, too innocent. She told herself it didn't matter. He wouldn't even notice her. When she arrived, the mansion was alive with music. Champagne glasses clinked, laughter swirled through the marble halls, and the scent of wealth and perfume tangled in the air. Katerina greeted her with the same exuberant smile she always had, tipsy, radiant, unaware of how her father's name made Gina's chest tighten. Finally. "I thought you weren't coming," Katerina said, throwing her arms around her. "Come, you have to see the cake. It's bigger than me." Gina smiled, followed, laughed in all the right places, until a ripple moved through the crowd, quiet but undeniable. Heads turned. He had arrived, Alexandro. He moved through the guests like gravity itself, calm and deliberate, his black suit a shade too sharp for celebration. Conversations faltered as people made way. He said little, smiled less, but his presence commanded the room. When his gaze found hers, it wasn't surprise that flickered there. It was recognition, and something he tried very hard to hide. She looked away first. Her breath wouldn't obey her. The glass in her hand trembled so slightly that the bubbles nearly spilled. He shouldn't have come. He had sent his gift early, told Katerina he might be busy, but fathers didn't miss birthdays. Not this one. And yet, the moment he stepped inside, he knew he'd walked into danger. She was there, Gina Moretti, standing near the bar in a dress that made restraint feel like punishment. Her hair fell in soft waves down her shoulders, her expression carefully polite, but her eyes, they betrayed her. He greeted his guests, smiled for the cameras, endured the meaningless chatter of businessmen who feared him. But his focus never strayed far from her. Every time she laughed, every step she took, it was unbearable. He'd built his life on control. Tonight, it was slipping. Later, when the music slowed and the lights dimmed, Katerina laughed and grabbed her father's hand. "Dance with me, Papa," she said. He obliged, steady and formal, the crowd watching, charmed. Then someone called for the friends to join in. Gina hesitated, caught between the crowd and her guilt. Katerina waved her over with a grin. "Come on, don't hide!" And somehow, Gina ended up standing before him when the song changed. The guests laughed, urging them forward. Just one dance. Harmless. He placed a hand at her waist. Light. Distant. Proper. Her fingers brushed his shoulder. Innocent touch. Devastating contact. Neither of them spoke. The music filled the space between heartbeats. When the song ended, she stepped back, breathless, trembling, lost. And for the first time, He let his eyes show what he could never say aloud. They both knew. The line had already been crossed. The party had faded into a blur of laughter and light, but that dance, that single, stolen moment, kept replaying like a secret she couldn't silence. She'd danced with him in front of everyone, yet it felt like no one else existed. His hand had rested just above her waist, the pressure slight but certain. The world had tilted then, not because of his touch, but because of what it awakened inside her. Now, hours later, the music had shifted to something slower, softer. The guests swayed, lost in their own versions of happiness. Gina tried to disappear into the crowd, but her pulse betrayed her every time she caught a glimpse of him, standing near the balcony, cigarette in hand, speaking to no one. She told herself to leave, to go home before her thoughts got dangerous again, but her feet disobeyed. They carried her through the open doors, out into the cool night air. He didn't turn when she stepped beside him. The city glittered below, indifferent and vast. "Beautiful view," she said, her voice too steady for how her heart raced. Alexandro's reply was quiet. "It looks better when it rains." She smiled faintly. "You sound like someone who misses the storm." He glanced at her then, not with the detached calm he used with everyone else, but with something heavier. "Maybe I do." For a long moment they stood in silence. The night wind brushed against her bare shoulders. Her pulse throbbed in her throat. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I know. And yet, you're not telling me to leave." His jaw tightened. "Because I'm trying to remember what it feels like to do the right thing." She met his gaze, dark, restrained, and full of everything neither dared to name. "And what's the right thing, Alexandro?" He looked away first. Not this, but when she turned to go, his hand caught her wrist, not hard, just enough to stop her. Her breath hitched as the distance between them vanished. The world shrank to heartbeats and heat. "Tell me to let you go," he said, his voice low, almost pleading. She couldn't. Her silence was an answer all its own. He stepped closer, his breath mingling with hers. "You don't understand what you're asking for, Gina." "Then make me understand." It wasn't permission. It was surrender. His lips found hers, slow at first, deliberate, like a man memorizing a sin before committing it. The taste of smoke, scotch, and danger lingered between them. When he finally pulled away, she saw the conflict in his eyes, desire and regret, tangled like barbed wire. "This never happened," he murmured. "Do you understand?" Gina nodded, though her heart screamed otherwise. As he walked back inside, the music swelled again, a love song meant for someone else, and she knew, with the cruel clarity only love can bring, that nothing between them would ever be the same. 2 days passed, but her body still remembered that kiss. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt it again, the heat, the trembling, the quiet ache that followed. It wasn't supposed to happen, yet it had, and now she couldn't stop wondering what it meant, or if it had meant anything to him at all. Katerina had called that morning, bright and casual, telling Gina that her father had left the city for a meeting with some Russians from New York. Gina tried to sound normal, but something inside her twisted. The idea of him somewhere far away, unreachable, unsettled her more than it should have. She went for a walk that evening to clear her head. The city was loud, restless and alive, but she couldn't drown out the noise inside her chest. She stopped at a small cafe on the corner of Monroe and State, ordered tea, and tried to pretend her world hadn't changed. But then she saw the black SUV parked across the street. Tinted windows, engine idling. Her stomach sank. The door opened. One of Alexandro's men stepped out, tall, broad, unmistakable. He crossed the street and stopped at her table. "Miss Moretti," he said quietly. "Mr. Volkov sent me." Her pulse spiked. "For what?" "He wants a word. Privately." The cafe noise faded as she followed him outside. The SUV door opened, revealing Alexandro sitting in the back seat, sharp suit, no tie, his expression unreadable. "Get in," he said softly. She did. He hadn't planned to see her again so soon. But plans rarely survived reality. The meeting in New York had gone badly, too many threats hidden behind polite smiles. One of his men had intercepted a message hours ago. The target wasn't him this time. It was Gina. He watched her climb into the car, rain streaking across the window. She looked frightened, though she tried to hide it. That innocence, the same thing that drew him in, was now a liability. He didn't waste time. "You've been followed for the last 2 days," he said. "Men I don't know, driving cars I don't recognize." "That's not coincidence," Gina's breath caught. "Why would anyone follow me?" "Because you walked into my house that night. Because people see everything and they assume what they want to." His voice hardened. "You're not safe, Gina, not anymore." She stared at him, confused, angry. "So what? You're here to tell me that my life's in danger because I made the mistake of knowing you?" Alexandro leaned forward, his tone low but sharp. "I'm here to keep you alive. That's the difference." Her eyes glistened, the tears stubbornly unshed. "You warned me not to come near you, remember? Maybe I should have listened." His jaw clenched. "Maybe you should have. But it's too late for that now." He turned to the driver. "Take her home. Stay until she's inside." When he finally looked back at her, his voice softened. Barely. "After tonight, don't go anywhere alone. If anyone asks about me, say you don't know anything. And mean it." Gina wanted to hate him, to scream, but all she could do was whisper, "Why are you doing this?" Alexandro's eyes flicked toward her, dark, weary, and something dangerously close to tender. "Because I made the mistake of caring," he said. "And that's a mistake people like me don't survive." The car stopped. She stepped out, the city lights blurring through her tears. And as the SUV disappeared into the rain, she realized something terrifying. She wasn't afraid of being followed. She was afraid of never seeing him again. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face through the rain-blurred glass, the way he said, "Because I made the mistake of caring." It shouldn't have meant anything. But to her, it did. For hours she lay awake, replaying every moment, his voice, his nearness, the quiet fury in his eyes when he talked about danger. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, her fear turned into something else. Resolve. By morning, she knew she couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. If she was being watched, she needed answers, and there was only one person who could give them to her. She texted him. "We need to talk. Not in cars. Not with guards. Just you and me." She didn't expect a reply, but 5 minutes later her phone lit up. "No. 8 p.m. Church Street warehouse. Come alone." Her pulse kicked hard. He hadn't refused. He'd warned her, but he still said yes. He'd read her message twice before answering. He should have deleted it, ignored her, done the smart thing, but smart had stopped mattering the night he kissed her. Now, pacing the empty warehouse hours later, he hated himself for letting her come. The place was quiet, except for the rain dripping through the roof. Steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat that wouldn't quit. When the door creaked open, he turned. She was there, hood pulled up, eyes bright and defiant despite the fear hiding beneath. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low. "You said 8, she shot back. "I'm here." He tried to look angry but failed. Something about her standing in his world, fragile yet fearless, stripped every wall he'd ever built. Gina took a hesitant step forward. "You said I was being followed. Why? Who are they?" "They're people who want leverage," he said quietly. "And they think you're mine." The words hit her harder than she expected. "I'm not," she whispered. Alexandro's jaw tightened. "I know." But his eyes betrayed him. And in that second, the air between them changed. She moved closer, trembling but steady. "Then tell me why you care. Tell me why you're doing this. You could have let them take me. You didn't." For a long moment he said nothing. The rain outside thickened, drowning the silence. Finally, he stepped toward her. One breath away. "I've done terrible things," he said. "Things that don't leave a man's soul clean. But when I look at you, I remember there's still something left. Something worth protecting." Gina's eyes filled, but she didn't look away. That's not protection, Alexandro. That's love. He flinched as if struck. Don't say that. Why not? She whispered. You already feel it. For the first time, the man who feared nothing looked terrified. He reached up, brushed her cheek, his touch both desperate and tender. Because love is how they'll destroy me, he said. Then, softer, a confession meant only for her. And you're the only thing I'd die to protect. The rain outside roared, drowning the world. And between those walls of steel and silence, two people who should never have met finally stopped running, if only for one stolen heartbeat. The next morning, the city looked normal. Too normal. The kind of calm that comes right before something breaks. She walked fast, coat pulled tight, pretending the chill in her spine was just the wind. Every sound felt too close, the echo of footsteps, the hum of a car engine idling too long. She told herself she was imagining it, until she saw the black sedan. It turned the corner when she did, slowed when she stopped. Her pulse spiked. She ducked into a coffee shop, heart hammering, ordered something she didn't taste. Through the window, she watched the car linger. A shadow behind the tinted glass, unmoving, watching. She took out her phone, fingers trembling. Gina. They're here. No name, no explanation. Just 2 words. 3 minutes later, her screen lit up. Alexandro. Stay where you are. She didn't breathe again until she saw him. Dark coat, wet hair, eyes like a storm ready to break. He walked straight past the line of customers, past the staring barista, and caught her wrist. Don't make a scene, he murmured. Outside, the sedan pulled away, vanishing like smoke. He'd known it would come to this. The moment word spread that she'd been seen with him, she became a target. In his world, affection was weakness, and weakness was blood in the water. He guided her to his car, silent except for the rain on the roof. When he finally spoke, his voice was ice. They're testing me. Who? She asked. Men who think I've gone soft, he said. Because I protected you. She turned to him, confusion flickering into fear. Then why bring me here? Why not send me away? Because if they think you matter, he said, glancing at her, then they'll come again. And I'd rather they find me waiting. The simplicity of it chilled her. At a red light, he looked at her. Really looked. You still don't understand what this means, do you? Then explain it, she whispered. He exhaled, a sound caught between anger and regret. It means you're not free anymore. You're in this now, my world, my rules. Gina held his gaze. Then teach me how to survive it. He almost smiled, but it wasn't joy. It was something darker, like a man realizing the fight was already lost. You shouldn't want this, he said. I don't, she answered softly. But I want you. For a heartbeat, the car was silent except for rain hitting steel. Then he reached for her hand, rough palm closing around trembling fingers. Then I'll make sure they never touch you, he said, even if it means starting a war. That night, the city slept under thunder and sirens. And somewhere in the dark, the first shot of that war was already being loaded. It happened fast. One moment, she was laughing at something he said. A quiet, fleeting sound in the dim back seat of his car. And the next, glass exploded. The world turned white with light and sound. Bullets shredded the night. Tires screamed. She ducked without thinking, hands over her head, heart slamming against her ribs. Alexandro's arm came around her, pulling her down as the car swerved hard. Stay down, he barked. The car jolted, metal groaning. She could smell gasoline, smoke, and something sharp. Blood, maybe. Hers? His? She couldn't tell. When the vehicle finally stopped spinning, everything was silent again. Too silent. Her ears rang. Her vision blurred. Then she heard him. Low, steady, dangerous. Gina, don't move. He pushed open his door, gun already in hand. The air outside reeked of rain and gunpowder. Through the cracked windshield, she saw 2 bodies sprawled across the street. Alexandro's men. Her throat tightened. She'd seen violence before, in movies and headlines. Never like this. never with him at the center of it. Calm, precise, lethal. When he fired, it wasn't rage. It was control. Each shot deliberate, measured, like punctuation in a language she didn't understand. And then, it was over. He came back to the car, blood spattering his sleeve, eyes burning with something that scared her more than the gunfire had. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, voice caught somewhere between a sob and a gasp. "Alexandra, who were they?" He glanced toward the street. "People who wanted to send a message." "What message?" "That I should have let you die." He'd known the hit was coming. He just hadn't expected it to come tonight. The second he saw the muzzle flash, instinct took over. Move. Shield her. End it. But now, staring at her trembling hands, he felt something crack inside. This was why men like him didn't love, because everything they touched turned into a target. He reached out, his thumb brushing a cut on her cheek. "You shouldn't have to see this." Her eyes met his, wide, wet, terrified. And she whispered, "Then stop pretending I'm someone you can protect from it." He froze. She was right. He'd brought her into the storm, and there was no way back. The sirens were getting closer. He turned the key, engine sputtering to life. "Hold on," he said. "We can't stay here." As they sped into the rain-washed streets, Gina looked back. The shattered glass, the streak of red on asphalt. Blood on the pavement, marking the start of something they couldn't undo. And for the first time, she realized love wasn't just dangerous with Alexandro. It was fatal. The world outside blurred into rain and sirens. By the time they reached the outskirts of the city, she didn't know how long they'd been driving. Her hands still shook, her heart still refused to slow. Alexandro said nothing. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the faint, steady rhythm of his breath. When the car finally stopped, they were in front of an old brick warehouse by the river. Hidden, forgotten, lifeless. He turned off the ignition and looked at her for the first time since the shooting. "You're safe here," he said quietly. The words felt fragile, like something that could break if she breathed too hard. Inside, the safe house was bare. One small bedroom, a couch, a kettle that looked older than she was. She sank onto the couch, pulling her knees to her chest. Her voice was small when she finally spoke. "They died because of me, didn't they?" Alexandro took off his coat, blood dried along the cuff. "No, they died because they worked for me." She looked up, eyes glassy. "That's not an answer," he paused. Then softer. "It's the only one that matters." He'd cleaned his gun twice, not because it needed it, but because it kept his hands busy. Kept his mind off the image of her shaking in the car, whispering his name like a prayer and a curse all at once. He'd seen fear before. He'd caused it, but her fear, it hollowed him. When he looked up, she was standing by the window, barefoot, wearing one of his shirts. The sight nearly undid him. "Why are you still here, Gina?" he asked. "You could run." "You should." She turned, her hair a dark mess against the pale fabric. "Run where? Back to a world that doesn't know what I've seen? What I feel?" Her honesty cut through the room like a blade. He took a step toward her. "You don't understand what you're saying." "I do." She met his gaze, trembling but sure. "You think I don't see who you are, Alexandro. I do. I see the man under the monster. And maybe that's why I can't leave." He wanted to tell her to stop, to take it back, to hate him. Instead, he reached out, fingers brushing her jaw, her pulse racing beneath his thumb. "You shouldn't love a man who kills," he whispered. She didn't flinch. "Then stop making it sound like I have a choice." For a long moment, they just stood there. Two people bound by something darker than love, brighter than reason. Outside, the rain fell harder, blurring the city lights until the world looked like a painting coming undone. And in that fragile quiet, Alexandro realized something he couldn't admit. The danger wasn't out there anymore. It was her. He hadn't slept. The storm outside hadn't stopped, and neither had the storm in his chest. The men who died were loyal, too loyal to betray him. Which meant someone higher, someone smarter, had sold him out. By dawn, he had his answer. The call came from one of his lieutenants, a trembling voice saying, "We found him, boss." Now, hours later, the safe house basement smelled of cold iron and gasoline. The kind of place built for secrets no one survives. The man tied to the chair was one of his own, young, sweating, eyes darting like a trapped animal. Alexandro stood in front of him, sleeves rolled, calm as ever. "You were paid," he said quietly. "How much?" the man stammered. "You don't understand. It wasn't—" Alexandro's hand moved before the sentence ended. One sharp crack against the table, the sound echoing off concrete. Not a shout, not rage, just precision. "How much?" he repeated. The man started crying. 50 grand. They said you were distracted, that you had a weakness. The word cut deeper than he expected. Weakness. He leaned closer, voice almost gentle. "Say her name." The man's mouth trembled. "Gina." A silence fell so thick it swallowed the air. Then Alexandro whispered, "And now she'll never be your concern again." The shot was clean. One flash, one sound, and it was over. He didn't look away. He never did. But this time, something inside him twisted. Not guilt, not mercy. Something heavier. When he walked upstairs, his hands were steady. His heart was not. She heard the shot. It was faint, but unmistakable, that metallic crack that didn't belong to thunder. Her stomach dropped. She stood frozen in the hallway, watching the basement door, waiting for him to come out. When he finally did, he looked different, colder, distant, as if he'd stepped back into the version of himself she'd only heard rumors about. He didn't speak at first, just poured himself a glass of vodka and stared at it like he was trying to drown something invisible. "Was it him?" she asked softly. "Yes." "What did you do?" Alexandro looked up, eyes dark and unreadable. "I ended it," she swallowed, voice breaking. "That's not ending it. That's killing it." He set the glass down, sharp against the counter. "In my world, that's the same thing." The silence stretched between them, heavy with what neither could say. Finally, she stepped closer, her voice trembling. "You think you're protecting me, but all you're doing is burying yourself." He laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that wasn't laughter at all. "Maybe that's what I deserve." When she reached for his hand, he didn't pull away. But he didn't hold on either. And standing there, under the dim light of that cold kitchen, Gina realized she wasn't falling for a man anymore. She was falling for a ghost. It had been 3 days since the shooting. 3 days in the safe house, where silence pressed against the walls, and Alexandro spoke in half-sentences that always ended with, "Trust me." But she could feel it, the world outside closing in. Phones off, windows covered. Every sound made her flinch. When the knock came, she thought it was her imagination. Then she saw Alexandro's expression harden, that flicker of recognition, of history. He opened the door. And there, standing in the rain like a ghost from another lifetime, was her father. "Hello, Alexandro," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were all steel. "Marco," Alexandro answered. "You shouldn't be here." I could say the same thing about my daughter. He hadn't seen Marco Moretti in over 10 years. They'd built empires together once, 2 young men hungry for power, carving Chicago into territories and bloodlines. Until it all collapsed in a single night of betrayal. Marco stepped inside, brushing rain off his coat, eyes flicking to Gina. "You look like your mother when she's about to make a terrible decision." "Dad," he held up a hand. "Save it. I know exactly what this is." Alexandro stayed silent, jaw tight. Marco turned to him. "I warned you before, didn't I? I told you if you ever came near my family again." "You said you'd kill me," Alexandro finished. "I remember." Gina's breath hitched. "What are you talking about?" Her father's voice softened, but the weight of it filled the room. "Your mother didn't die in an accident, Gina. She died because of a deal that went wrong. Alexandro was there. He was supposed to protect her." She froze. "That's not possible." Alexandro's gaze dropped to the floor. "It's true." Tears burned her eyes. "You knew? All this time?" He nodded slowly. "I've tried to atone for it every day since." Her father's fury cracked into something colder. "You don't atone by touching what's mine, Volkov. You destroy everything you touch." The silence after that was suffocating. Gina looked between them, two men bound by guilt and loss, and herself standing in the middle, a living reminder of what they'd both broken. Alexandro's voice was low when he finally spoke. "I never meant to fall for her, Marco, but I did, and I won't let you take her away now." Marco stared at him, the rain dripping off his coat, his hand twitching near his pocket. "Then we have a problem." Before she could speak, Alexandro stepped forward, placing himself between them. "Then aim at me," he said quietly. "Because I'll never raise a weapon to you. Not again." The words hung in the air, heavy, final, terrifying. Her father didn't draw, didn't move. He just looked at Alexandro like a man staring at a ghost he both hated and missed. Then he turned to Gina. "You think this is love? It's punishment, and one day you'll see it too." He left without another word. The door closed. The silence stayed. And for the first time, Gina didn't know who the real villain was. Her father, Alexandro, or fate itself. She didn't speak for hours after her father left. The rain kept falling, a constant hiss against the windows, like the city itself was whispering secrets she didn't want to hear. When she finally found her voice, it was quiet. "You were there that night." Alexandro didn't look up. He sat at the table, hands clasped, staring at nothing. "Yes." Her throat tightened. "Tell me everything." He shook his head once. "No good will come from it." "Then let me decide what's good for me," she said, voice rising. "You owe me that much." He looked at her then, eyes dark, tired, and full of something she'd never seen before. Not anger, not guilt, grief. He'd replayed that night in his head for years. Every scream, every mistake. "Your mother," he began slowly, "wasn't supposed to be there. The meeting was meant for your father and me, but she came instead, trying to save him from his own decisions." He stood, pacing like a man caught between memory and penance. "The hit wasn't meant for her. It was meant for me." Gina's breath hitched. "You mean," he nodded, "they planted the bomb in my car. She borrowed it. I should have stopped her." He stopped pacing, jaw tight. "Your father never forgave me, and I never forgave myself." Tears blurred her vision. The room felt smaller, colder. "And now me?" she whispered. "Do you think what we have, makes it better?" "No," he said softly. "It makes it worse." She turned away, hand covering her mouth to hold in a sob. "Then why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to see her die in your eyes every time you looked at me." The confession hit her harder than the truth itself. She turned back to him, voice trembling. "You could have left me alone." "I tried," he said. "But every time I saw you, it felt like life was giving me one more chance to do something right, and I failed again, because I wanted you instead of peace." For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, she walked closer, stopping just within reach. "You're not my salvation, Alexandro. You're my wound, and I don't know if I can stop touching it." He didn't reach for her, didn't beg. He just whispered, "Then at least know it was always love, even when it looked like ruin." The rain outside softened to a whisper. Two broken hearts stood inches apart, bound by guilt, by history, by a love neither had the strength to destroy. And somewhere in that quiet, Gina understood the cruelest part of fate. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It just changes the shape of your cage. The peace didn't last. It never did with him. By the next evening, the safe house phone rang. A sound so ordinary it felt wrong in that silence. Alexandro froze mid-step. Only 3 people had that number. None of them would call. He picked it up, voice low. "Volkov," a pause, then a man's voice, smooth and mocking. "You took something that doesn't belong to you, Alexandro. The girl. The Moretti daughter." Her name dropped like poison into the air. Alexandro's hand tightened around the phone. "What do you want?" "To remind you what happens to men who forget who they are," the voice said. "You built your empire on loyalty. Now you'll destroy it for love." The line went dead. He turned toward her slowly. She saw it instantly. the look in his eyes sharp and haunted. "What did they say?" she asked. "That they know where we are." He moved fast then, loading a weapon, pulling cash from the wall, his body all purpose and control. But underneath it, she saw it. The fear he never showed. "Alexandro, talk to me." He stopped, breath hard, hands shaking. "They want you. To make me bend, they'll hit everything I've built until I give you up." "Then do it," she said before she could stop herself. "Give me up." He stared at her, stunned. "If they're after me, I'd rather burn the world than hand you over," he said, cutting her off. The finality in his voice made her chest ache. "Then they'll come for you," she whispered. He smiled, but it wasn't really a smile. "They already have." He'd spent years preparing for war, stockpiles, alliances, exit plans. But nothing in those years had prepared him for this, because war was simple. Love wasn't. He knew who'd made the call. Viktor Mirov, his oldest rival. A man who'd waited years for the chance to hit him where it hurt most. He sent orders through encrypted lines, his voice cold. "Lock down the docks. No one moves without my word. And find her driver. If he's breathing, I want him brought to me." When he hung up, Gina was watching him, eyes wide, full of something between anger and heartbreak. "You can't fight them all," she said. He walked over, stopped inches away. "I can. I have to." Her tears came quiet. "You'll die for me." "No," he said softly. "I'll live for you. But first, I have to become the man you never wanted to see." And with that, he turned toward the door. Dark coat, gun holstered, shoulders set like armor. She wanted to stop him. But she didn't, because somewhere deep down she already knew. Love was never going to save him. It was going to finish him. The night bled into the city like ink. Rain blurred the lights again, same as the night she'd first walked into his world. Only this time, she knew what that world cost. Gina stood by the window of the safe house, watching Chicago breathe smoke and fear. In the distance, thunder rolled. Or maybe it wasn't thunder at all. Maybe it was Alexandro. She'd seen him leave hours ago. No bodyguards, no convoy. Just him. The man everyone feared, walking into the dark alone. He'd told her not to wait. But she couldn't move, because waiting for Alexandro Volkov felt like holding your breath at the edge of an explosion. He didn't start wars with noise. He started them with silence. When Alexandro entered the Black District, everything changed. The streets emptied. The air grew still. Men who'd spent their lives dealing in death suddenly found excuses to be elsewhere. He walked straight into Viktor Mirov's club. No disguise, no backup, no mercy. The guards raised their guns. He didn't flinch. His voice was calm, too calm. "Tell your boss," he said. "I'm here to collect what's mine." Then he pulled the trigger once. And the room obeyed. Back in the safe house, Gina jumped at the echo of distant gunfire. Her phone lit up with unknown numbers. Messages from Katerina, her father, the world she'd left behind. But she couldn't answer. Not yet, because loving a man like Alexandro wasn't about safety. It was about surrender. Every bullet out there was a promise. Every silence between them, a vow. And as she sank to her knees, her fingers pressed to the cold floor, she whispered to no one, "Please come back to me." Alexandro left a trail of smoke behind him. When he reached the docks, his car was already waiting. Black, idling, loyal. Inside, his second-in-command handed him a phone. "It's done," the man said. "Mirov's losing ground. But he's still standing." Alexandro stared out at the black water, face unreadable. "Good," he said. "Let him stand. I want him to see what happens when you touch what's mine." For a moment, he looked at his reflection in the window. Tired, hollow-eyed, human. He almost didn't recognize the man staring back. War had stripped everything else from him. Peace, mercy, restraint. All that was left was the love he couldn't unlearn. By dawn, the city was burning quietly, just enough to whisper that the Russian dawn had risen again. And miles away, In a dim apartment filled with the smell of rain, Gina sat on the floor, clutching his jacket to her chest. It smelled like smoke, like danger, like him, and for the first time, she understood what his world truly meant. Love wasn't his weakness, it was his weapon. The city was still bleeding when he came back, not in screams or sirens, but in silence. The kind of silence that follows after something irreversible. Gina had fallen asleep on the couch, his jacket wrapped around her like armor. When the door creaked open, she didn't wake at first, but she felt him. That pull, that gravity that always changed the air before he even spoke. He closed the door quietly, but every movement carried exhaustion. His coat was damp, his hand bloodied. He looked like the ghost of a man who'd won a war but lost his soul doing it. "Gina," he whispered. Her eyes fluttered open. When she saw him, she froze. Then she ran to him. "Oh my God, Alexandro, your hand, it's not mine," he said softly. And that broke something in her. She guided him to the couch, her fingers trembling as she tried to clean the wound. But he stopped her hand midway. "Don't," he said. "You shouldn't have to touch what I've done." Her voice cracked. "You did it for me." He looked at her then, really looked. And for the first time since she'd known him, his walls crumbled. "I killed a man tonight," he said quietly. "Not because he attacked me, not because it was business, but because he said your name." Her breath hitched. He stared at the floor, his voice unsteady now. "I built everything I am on control, every move, every deal. But with you, I can't control anything." She touched his face, her thumb brushing away the shadow of guilt. "You're not a monster, Alexandro." He gave a faint, hollow laugh. "I am. You just learned how to love the monster." She shook her head, eyes glistening. "No, I learned to see the man inside him." He leaned into her touch just slightly, as if afraid she might disappear. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I shouldn't love you." "Then don't," she said. "Just stay." He kissed her then. Not like a man claiming something forbidden, but like someone finally surrendering to what he'd fought too long. Her tears mixed with the taste of rain still on his lips. The world outside could burn, and neither of them would care. When the kiss broke, he rested his forehead against hers. "Gina," he breathed, "if I lose you, there's no kingdom left worth ruling." Her voice was soft. "Then stop ruling it." For a heartbeat, it felt possible. The impossible. A life beyond blood and power and ghosts. But in Alexandro's world, peace was never free. And love always came with a countdown. Morning came too quietly. The kind of quiet that doesn't mean peace. It means something's waiting. Gina woke to the smell of coffee and gun oil. Alexandro stood by the window, shirt half buttoned, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, controlled. Too controlled. "Yes," he said. "Move the shipment east. Don't use the docks." A pause. "And if anyone asks where I am, don't." He ended the call, jaw tight, eyes unreadable. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. He gave a half smile, weary and protective all at once. "I don't sleep much anymore." She crossed to him, fingers brushing the bruises on his chest. Faint reminders of the night before. "What happens now?" "Now," he said, "we disappear. 1 week, maybe 2, until things settle. Disappear?" His gaze flicked toward the city. "I've burned too many bridges to pretend we're safe." But safety was already an illusion. Because that same morning, miles away, someone else was talking, softly, nervously, into a burner phone. Katerina Volkov, her best friend. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "I swear, I didn't mean to. But he deserves to know she's alive. Her father deserves to know." The man on the other end smiled, a cold, efficient smile. "Good girl. You just saved your family." He hung up, and an address went out to every pair of eyes Viktor Mirov owned. By afternoon, the first shadow passed the safe house window. Then another. Alexandro's instincts kicked in instantly. He moved to the window, lifted the blind just an inch. Black cars. 3 of them. He didn't say a word. He just reached for the gun. Gina's breath caught. "What is it?" He looked back at her, eyes hard. Someone talked. Her stomach turned cold. Katerina? He didn't answer, but she saw it in his face. That was worse than a yes. Within seconds, the silence outside broke. Boots crunching gravel, doors slamming. The war he thought he'd ended was back at his doorstep. He grabbed Gina's hand. Basement now, but she didn't move. Her eyes filled with disbelief, betrayal, heartbreak. She was my friend, Alexandro. I know. His voice cracked. That's why it hurts. He kissed her once, hard, desperate. Before pulling her down the narrow staircase just as the first bullet shattered the window. Glass rained over the room like stars dying. In the darkness of the basement, she clutched his arm, trembling. Above them, men shouted. Russian, English, chaos merging. Her voice broke. They'll kill you if you stay. He looked at her then, calm, resolute, almost peaceful. I know, he said. That's why I won't. And as the door above creaked open and heavy footsteps descended, Alexandro Volkov raised his gun and whispered, Stay behind me, Angel. The war had come home. And this time, there would be no escape. Gunfire split the air like thunder. Every wall shook, every heartbeat felt borrowed. Gina pressed herself against the cold basement wall, the smell of gunpowder thick in the air. She could hear Alexandro's footsteps above, steady, precise, fearless. He moved like a shadow trained for war. And yet, every bullet that missed him felt like mercy running out. When the noise finally broke, it broke all at once. One last shot, then silence. Gina's hands were shaking as she climbed the stairs, every creak a countdown. The living room looked like the aftermath of a storm. Broken glass, torn curtains, smoke curling from bullet holes. And there, standing in the middle of it all, was Alexandro. He was still upright. Still breathing, but barely. Blood spread across his shirt, slow and deliberate, like the city itself was taking him back. She ran to him, catching him as he stumbled. Don't you dare, she whispered. Don't you dare leave me. He smiled faintly, that same crooked smile that had once made the world tilt. I told you, he said, voice rough. If they came for me, I'd finish it. Her tears fell fast, mixing with the rain dripping through the shattered ceiling. You can't finish this, she cried. Not like this. He reached for her hand, cold, trembling, and pressed something into it. A key under the bed, he murmured. A bag, cash, a passport. Go now. I'm not leaving you. Yes, you are. His tone turned fierce for a moment, the command of the man he'd once been. You'll live. That's how I win. Then his voice softened again. I built a kingdom on fear, Gina, but you taught me what it was to feel human. Her voice cracked. Then don't die human, Alexandro. Live for me, he exhaled, half laugh, half surrender. Angel, he whispered, eyes fluttering shut. I already did. The sound of approaching sirens filled the distance. Blue lights reflected off the glass like fragments of the sky. Gina held him until the sound blurred into nothing, until his chest stopped rising, until her world fell quiet. She didn't scream. She didn't move. She just pressed her forehead against his and whispered, You kept your promise. You didn't give me up. Weeks later, Chicago began to forget. The headlines called it an underworld collapse. The streets called it peace. But in a quiet apartment near Lake Michigan, a woman still kept a key on her necklace. Sometimes when it rained, she'd close her eyes and swear she could feel his hand in hers again, steady, warm, immortal in memory, because love like that doesn't die. The rain has stopped now. But some stories never really end. Maybe love was never meant to save them. Maybe it was only meant to change them, to carve two souls out of chaos and make them remember what it means to feel alive. He was the storm that ruined her life, and the calm that rebuilt it. And even now, when the city sleeps and the world has moved on, somewhere in that quiet space between memory and heartbeat, she still hears him whisper, Stay behind me. Angel, because love like theirs doesn't fade. It haunts, it breathes, it becomes legend. If this story reached something in you, if you believe even forbidden love deserves a second chance, leave a heart in the comments below and let us know what you'd risk everything for. This was BRD Stories Hub, where love isn't soft, it's cinematic, where every heartbeat tells a story, and where sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is feel. Subscribe for more stories of passion, power, and redemption, because the next story might just be the one your heart's been waiting for. It lingers, between thunder and silence, between sin and salvation. And every time the city lights flickered against the rain, it felt like he was still watching her. The Russian dawn had set, but his light never went out.